Hello, today I want to talk about the one global bubble that we cannot let burst, and that is the one of mental health. Currently, there is a global epidemic of suicide that is startlingly increasing in numbers. So, in the United States, for example, suicide within the age group of 35 to 64 has increased 30% in just the past decade. Suicide rates have increased tremendously in European nations by up to 40% in the European nations that have been afflicted negatively by the global banking cabal, such as Greece, and I know in Portugal, Spain, Italy as well. And historically, there have been also very, very close links between increasing numbers of suicide and global economic devastation. So, for example, during the 1997 Asian financial crisis, suicides in Japan soared by more than 30% during that time. So I believe this is a truly important point to discuss if we look at why this is happening, because I think it's not only just a reflection on the poor mental health of an individual, but it's a reflection upon a society that is mentally ill, a society whose values are all screwed up, that has it all wrong for what people should value, and that is what is driving people to suicide. That is what's driving people crazy. So it's a really important topic to address. If you think that this has nothing to do with any of my other video topics, you're wrong in that sense, because there's going to be a great reset in the wealth of a lot of people, whether that comes from people being Cypressed in the future that are unaware that the big World Bank organizations are plotting to just steal money out of your savings account. I've been warning people for months upon months upon months to withdraw their savings from the global banking system because they are going to be Cypressed in the future. But of course, 99% of people that hear that warning will not listen, and then they'll be Cypressed. So there's going to be a lot of people losing wealth that way. There's going to be a lot of people losing wealth because they are not taking the proper steps to protect, not to protect, basically to convert their fiat currency into sound money. Because if they leave their money in fiat currency, there's a lot of people that on paper are fiat currency millionaires that are going to be basically financially devastated because they understand what's going on there. So that's number two, how there's going to be a great reset. And number three, there's going to be a great reset because when this happens, when there is a collapse of the global banking system, or the fractional reserve banking system, which is going to happen, then there's going to be a lot of angry people. There's going to be a lot of angry rich people that became middle class. There's going to be a lot of angry middle class that became poor, and there's going to be a lot of angry poor people that became even poorer that are rightfully going to go and they're going to go and look for the people that did it to them, which are the bankers. Because if you look at like someone like JP Morgan that had, for the first 3 quarters of 2013, okay, so there's 20 trading days per month, 60 trading days per quarter, 180 trading days for the first 3 quarters. The proprietary traders at JP Morgan had a perfect record. So think about that. You're in the market and every day you make money. How is that possible? It's only possible if you're rigging the system, if you have criminally rigged the system. Because to have a perfect trading record, 180 consecutive positive days where you make profits in the market, that is equivalent to going to Vegas, or Macau, I guess is the new Vegas. If you go to Macau and you place 180 consecutive bets on blackjack and you win 180 times in a row, what would happen? What would happen? You get the big thugs in suits come and drag you away and interrogate you. They either stick you in jail or beat you senseless. In Vegas, they probably beat you senseless, and then you'd be blackballed from ever coming and participating in those casinos again, where you cheated them, where you won 180 hands in a row. This is JP Morgan traders won 180 hands in a row, but yet they're welcomed with open arms back into the market by the regulators, because the regulators are crooks, just like the big bankers, and they're welcome to pillage and plunder. And who are they stealing from? They're stealing from everyone else, transferring money to themselves. So these people are going to be shocked too when the angry come from them. And they're going to destroy their property, and so there's going to be a great reset in that sense as well. So all these things are going to cause people to be distraught emotionally, but it can be avoided. So I think a lot of people are going to commit suicide when this happens, but we can prevent it by looking at the issues now. So that's why I'm making this video now. So what do I mean when I say society is sick? Well, society is sick because we have a legal system that basically makes crime easier to commit. I mean, that is a given. Anytime you look at like these known criminals in the banking world, like HSBC, that laundered billions of dollars for drug cartels and not a single banker went to jail. So obviously, we have a legal system that facilitates crime. We have a banking system that uses currency. I don't want to even call it money because it's not really fiat currency. Is based upon, it's a faith-based system. Like the other video I made that was called when the world's biggest religion collapses, that's when we'll have economic collapse, because the world's biggest religion is based upon this fiat currency. So we have money, which should allow people to enjoy freedom and the fruits of their labor, but we have a monetary system that bankers have put in place that they force us to use and enslaves us. And we have an education system that dumbs us down. So the whole paradigm of how life should be is flipped upside down on its head. So that is a problem today, because everything today is based upon perception. So that is how those in control, which is basically the fascist corporate government military industrial complex, they rely on selling people lies and a false perception to maintain control over you. If people, when I tell people the goal of the institutional academic system is to make people dumber. A lot of people say, oh, that's ridiculous, right? But think about it. Think about sometimes how you may overhear your friends talk, and they say, hey, would you rather have a beautiful woman that is intelligent or a beautiful woman that is dumb as a rock? Or the same thing, when girls talk about guys, they say, hey, would you rather have a husband that is handsome and intelligent, or a husband that is handsome and dumb as a rock? And whenever you hear the person answer handsome or beautiful and dumb as a rock versus handsome and beautiful and intelligent, it is then you ask them the next question, why? And they say, oh, because they're easier to control, right? So what do those in power in that banking, government, military, industrial complex have over people right now? Is control, right? So how would they maximize that control? By making people dumber. So you got to put two and two together, right? How do they make people dumber? Through the institutional academic system. That is how they maintain control. Because a lot of people can go through an entire day without an original thought, without one original thought, which is kind of scary. Now, certainly some suicides can be simply explained by a lack of certain neurochemicals in the brain, like the mood-enhancing neurochemicals like serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine. But we do have historical precedent for what is going to happen when bankers ruin people economically, like in Greece, when the suicide rate soared a tragic but tremendous 43% in just 4 years, from 2007 to 2011, when in 2011 the suicide rate in Greece hit the highest rate in 50 years. So certainly some of that, again, is just due to economic devastation, as there's a report of a 33-year-old Greek man that revealed in a suicide note that he had just been fired and only had €8 left to his name, and that's why he killed himself. But there are others that are just simply due to the mental illness of society are just not able to cope with a lesser standard of living only. You know, they should still be able to get by fine, but it is the self-inflicted burden that they place on themselves due to this loss of a status or standard of living that they see that causes them to commit suicide. And that is a mental illness, not only of the individual, but of society at large. So, you know, I thought a good way to look at this problem is just look to one of the wealthiest nations in the world where suicide is endemic, and that is in Korea. So, you know, in Korea you have pop superstars like Yoon, I believe she was 26 when she killed herself. You have an ex-president of Korea that killed himself. You have a Samsung heiress who was only 26 years old that killed herself. You have at least a dozen famous actors and actresses that also committed suicide. So I know a lot of people aren't familiar with the Korean entertainment world, so that's why I'm not naming all these names of these actors and actresses that did. But there's even a superstar model, Doll Kim, that killed herself when she was 20. You know, comparably speaking, because most people are more familiar with Western celebrities, that would be the same as if Paris Hilton, Bill Clinton, Bradley Cooper, Selena Gomez, Mila Kunis, who else? Britney Spears, Rihanna, and if they all killed themselves within a matter of years, that would be the same thing. People would be like, what the heck is going on here? So I thought looking at the tragedy that's going on in Korea would be a good way to see what is wrong with society. How is society mentally sick all over the world? Let's start looking at this endemic by looking at Lee Yoon-Hyung, who was the 26-year-old Samsung heiress that had about 180 million in stock and was in line to come into a fortune, the family fortune worth, I believe, it was 68 billion or 86 billion, whatever it was. It was obviously an enormous fortune, and she ended up killing herself. So the story was, at first, actually, I'm sure that this story translates to suicides all over the world as well, that it was reported that she died in a car accident, but when journalists looked and delved more deeply into the situation, couldn't find any reports of any car accidents, then the truth finally came out that she had hanged herself in her apartment in New York because she was studying at a New York school at the time. So the truth that came out as far as why she really killed herself was that she had fallen in love with a gentleman from the middle class, but her parents forbade it because her parents wanted her to marry into the same status as her own family. So when you think about that situation, that is just bad parenting. Yeah, I'm going to put it out there and say that even though it won't be popular with some people. But when you bully your own child into committing suicide because you have to uphold the silly notion called status, which you can't take to the afterlife with you. When everyone dies, everyone takes the same thing into the afterlife with them, which is just their soul and no material wealth. Why was it so important for her parents to put so much pressure and make her feel so bad and so guilty about finding happiness with someone that wasn't from the same socioeconomic class that she actually killed herself? That's just bullying. That's bullying your own child into guilt and shame, which shouldn't happen. And that's terrible parenting, because if your child has found happiness and found love with someone, love is a rare, beautiful thing that should be cherished. And if she was lucky enough to find it, her parents should have been supportive of that, and then her daughter would still be alive. Their daughter would still be alive today. That's why looking at the endemic of suicide in Korea is, I think, translates to the mental sickness of society at large, because certainly you can look at bullying as a problem in a lot of other countries. In Asia, among school kids, it's a huge problem in the United States as well. So if you have a child that's bullying someone, again, that is terrible parenting on your behalf, because you're not teaching your child the proper values to respect other people, where they feel that they, I always feel like bullying is like hating. People that always hate, they're going to hate on this video, that hate on other videos on YouTube. That's a reflection when they hate on others of what is wrong with themselves. It's just a sign that something they're not happy with themselves, so they have to try to extract what little happiness they can every day instead of making themselves better by trying to put other people down. So that is a mental illness of society again. A lot of parents don't teach your kids to find a mission in life, to find a purpose in life. Instead, they teach them to go after money and to go after status. So once they get that, like with Doll, who was a supermodel, when she had all that status and fame and all that money, and she still felt empty, well, she felt like she had all the things that society tells you. Now, I don't know her parents, but I'm saying this is what society tells you. That society tells you you need to be happy, and she wasn't happy, so she couldn't figure it out. In Korea, for the college admissions test, like the SATs, if you don't do well on that, then sometimes kids commit suicide, which is ridiculous because that, again, is all about status, because it's getting into like a top school that will get you a good job, will you be looked upon favorably in society, but it has nothing to do with happiness. In Korea, let's go back to that, the whole thing of a lot of times parents try to bully their kids. So into doing what they want them to do, not what the kid wants to do. What does that do? That strips away their self-identity. That's why they don't have a strong sense of self. That's why they're not mentally strong. That's why they may end up committing suicide, because you strip them away of that when you tell them that you must obey what they want and not let your child be what they want. So I'm not saying that as a parent you shouldn't guide them, but you have to let your kid grow and also you have to water your seed. So generally, when you look at the societies that have a very high rate of suicide, again, there's something, either a very strong element of a lack of control that individual feels they have over their life, or some type of belief system, whether it's cultural or being enforced upon them by a teacher or by a parent or by another authority figure, that they don't have control over their life. For example, like Japan is another country that has a very high suicide rate. There's about 30,000 suicides committed per year, which is about the same number as in the US, although obviously the US has a much, much larger population. So in Japan, there's a saying that it can't be helped. So whenever something bad happens to somebody, they often reply with the Japanese saying, it can't be helped, that you should just take it. But that is a ludicrous notion that we need to change, because people have choices. That's what people don't understand. People are told to believe in kismet, fate, determination, and they believe that something bad that's happened to them was destined to be, that they can't change it, or they don't have a choice about changing their life path. That is the kind of mentality that breaks down someone's character, someone's self-worth, their sense of their place in this universe, that causes them then to give up hope and to have this sense of despair and hopelessness that is so strong they commit suicide. So people have to realize, even when it comes to strong things like religion, if someone's born into a Christian family, they think they have no choice but to be a Christian. If they're born into a Jewish family, they think they have no choice but to be a Jew, and to marry another Jew. Or if they're a Muslim, they believe they have no choice but to be a Muslim. But that's ridiculous. Like, people have the choice to explore other religions and pick the one that they feel is best suited for them. There is not, there's not a sense of, or there shouldn't be a sense of determinism, even though people feel like that they're slotted into this certain caste, per se, in life, even with social class in India and the caste system. No, you always have a choice. So even when you hear people say about their jobs, I hate my job, I can't stand my job, but yet they don't realize that they're making a choice to be miserable every day at work, because these people could be looking for another job. But granted, in this type of economy, it is much more difficult to leave a job that you don't like for fear of not being able to find another job. However, I've heard that time and time again, even during times when the economy was great. People say, I can't stand my job, I can't stand my boss. What do? You see them a year later, hey, what are you doing? They're still in the same job. They've made zero effort. They don't exert their power of choosing to be happy, or choosing to build a stronger sense of character, a stronger sense of self, and exerting the power they have in life over their direction in life. Way back when I was in college and I met a friend of a friend who was an Asian kid who had all this pressure on his parents to become an engineer, and he wanted to become an architect. And this kid was brilliant as far as his artwork. Showed me some of his artwork, and it was amazing. And I thought he would be a brilliant architect. But he said that his parents said it was unacceptable. They cut him off financially if he did not go on and become an engineering major. And I could tell he was torn up. He was torn up inside about pursuing his real love and passion, which is architecture, or disappointing his parents. And I remember trying to encourage him to forget what his parents wanted. I said, do what you want to do, because you're at that crossroads right now where you can do what your parents want you to do, but you're going to be miserable the rest of your life and resent your parents. Or you can do what you love. Your parents might cut you off financially, but so what? Get a job, work, do what you need to do to make ends meet. But in the end, your parents will come around too if they truly love you. If they don't love you, then they'll disown you. That's just terrible parenting. Forget about them. So I don't know what he ended up doing, but these are the situations in which I hear, because I just talked with him one night and he was a friend of a friend, so unfortunately we didn't stay in touch. But these are the kind of situations I hear when people end up committing suicide, because they get bullied and they get their sense of identity stripped away from them. And if parents want that from their kids, they should just get a slave. They shouldn't even have a child, because that is part of the mental illness of today that extends to either bad parenting, or when it comes to bullying, that's a sickness of society as well. Now, when we go back to this bad parenting issue, after college I worked in some of the most violent, crime-ridden neighborhoods in Philadelphia for 4 years in the healthcare industry. And I remember actually the first day I went to work at one of the health clinics in Southwest Philadelphia, the manager there asked me to walk a nurse to her car after her shift was over. And it was like 5 o'clock in broad daylight, and at the end of the day, and I asked the manager, sure, I'll do it, but where's her car? And she actually pointed to me outside the door, because it was a glass door to the clinic, and I could see her car parked curbside on the street about 15 meters away. And I asked the manager, I said, are you crazy? Like, it's only 15 meters. What can happen? It's broad daylight. What can happen to her 15 meters? And the manager said, John, please, don't argue with me. Can you just walk her to her car? So, and then I realized how much crime happened in that neighborhood, because I worked for a healthcare provider that provided healthcare basically in areas where there are like no hospitals, no other healthcare providers, because these neighborhoods were so poor and so ridden with crime that other providers wouldn't go in there. And what I learned and what I saw a lot of too was crazy, because you would see 16-year-old girls come to the clinic that are pregnant for the third time. So they already have 2 kids, and you'd be like, what the hell is going on? You're 16 years old, you can barely take care of yourself, and you're having 3 kids. And you talk to these kids, and then you will understand that they would have kids because they felt no love at home. So they just wanted to have a baby that would love them back. And I actually saw that too, as far as, because I would work with at-risk youth when I was in Philly, and then when I moved to LA, I mentored gang members or ex-gang members that just gotten out of gangs. And when I talked to them, I would invariably find out too that they joined gangs because no one at home cared about them. So they felt like the gang was their family. And so this is an issue too, that a lot of times parents, or I guess young teenagers, what I saw in young teenagers in these poor, high crime-ridden neighborhoods, having children when they're so young and having multiple children. Actually, I think that today we see some of the same problems with women. So it has progressed now. Not 16-year-old girls that aren't mentally ready to have babies, but now women in their 30s that aren't ready to have babies having babies, because we kind of have like this perfect storm. Because obviously, cultures in which parents bully their kids have always been around, but there's been an explosion in consumerism since then. So parents teach your kids to go after status, to go after that monetary gain for an elevated position in society. So when they get that and they're not happy, then that leaves people confused. And we also have, I believe, the proliferation of technology like smartphones, which has regressed communication, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in parent-children relationships, boyfriend-girlfriend, husband-wife, teacher-student relationships, or whatever. You also have regression in communication as well, which stunts emotional maturity, emotional growth. So I believe that you have now, it has progressed from 16-year-old girls not mentally ready to have a kid to 30-year-old women not ready to have kids that are having kids. And this is also the problem because they're not passing on that same strong sense of self-identity, self-worth to their kids. And this is why we are having this global epidemic of suicide. And I think smartphones contribute to this because you see people that communicate really, really critical, important things in life, things that can be considered as really important landmarks in life that are now communicated just through via text, through the various text messaging services such as WhatsApp, Line, and whatnot, versus being communicated face to face. Because when I was a child, everything important was communicated to you face to face. Now people break up via text messages. People find it, and those that don't find it easy to break up via text message, find it easy to break up over the phone versus doing this in person. Or people will fire people via text messages or by phone instead of doing it face to face like a real human being. So in a lot of ways, smartphones have contributed to less human interaction. When is the last time you actually went out with a friend? Because I had as a general rule of thumb when cell phones first, became popular, even before smartphones, that I would not answer my cell phone while I was hanging out with friends. Because number one, I thought it was just rude, even though people do it all the time, to answer their cell phones when they're in the middle of a conversation and hanging out with you. And I felt that unless it was an emergency, if it's an emergency, then the person's going to call back and then I'll know. Or otherwise, 99% of the time, probably 99.9% of the time, it's not going to be an emergency. So it's nothing important and I can call back my friend at a later time. So that contributed to good quality time, to better bonding with other human beings, to closer friendships. But now, when is the last time you actually hung out with a friend where either you or your friend did not get on Facebook, get online, get on WhatsApp while in the presence of your friend and spend at least 5-10 minutes right in front of your friend, just ignoring your friend? So I think this lack of communication between people, even when you're together in the other person's company, has really contributed to this lack of identity, of people really knowing who they are, because we're used to doing things that have a high emotional impact, like I said, like ending a relationship, like ending a job, and we're able now just to shirk that responsibility and shirk being able to grow as a human being by just doing that via text message on the smartphone. And I think that is terrible. Terrible for society, terrible for humanity. So it's almost like smartphones have retarded our human development and that we're stuck in a mentality that is far less than the physical age of a person. So people's emotional maturity is being stunted. So, when you see high incidences of suicide, and certainly you see suicide, like I said before, that's due to something wrong organically with the brain, where, certain chemical that enhances the production of neurotransmitters can cure that, or in the case of NFL players that are suffering from chronic traumatic encephalopathy, that is just due to, again, an abnormal amount production of brain protein that damages brain cells that have to do with the emotional center of the brain, the memory center of the brain, and those things are quite different because I remember when I was reading about that, because that's a big thing now in the NFL. Like Tony Dorsett made a comment that because he has been diagnosed with CTE right now, and he said, I think at every point in he said everyone has considered suicide at one point or another in their life. And I just don't believe that to be true, because I've never considered suicide in my life. But I think I was just blessed to be born very mentally strong, because I remember even at age 6, age 7, questioning things that I did not agree with, even though the rest of society was doing something. So I think that I was, like I said, I was just lucky to be born very mentally strong, because I didn't have that same, even though I grew up in a really white neighborhood, it was called racial slurs like 1,000 times when I was young. I didn't have that same immigrant experience that a lot of Asians growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood had. Of, you know, I hear, I remember going to plays that other Asian Americans put on, saying that they just wanted to blend in, they hoped that they were white. I never had that. I always had a very strong sense of self. I never wanted to be white to fit in. I never wanted to be anyone else to fit in. So I just wanted to be myself, and I really, really had that from a very young age. But I think, you know, obviously some people are born with it, some people aren't, but it is something that a parent can cultivate in a child. And one way you can cultivate that strong sense of self is don't give your 5-year-old an iPad or an iPhone and let them just waste their brain on it for hours and hours and hours at a time. Have them communicate and play with other little kids, because that's what I did when I was a kid. I remember like getting home from high school. We went out and we played basketball, we played football, we played street hockey. You know, we didn't stay at home on our iPhones texting people, Instagramming, Twittering. So you know, we always had that face-to-face interaction that helped our emotional development, that helped your you know, a young teenager become a young man or a young woman. So even in countries like Korea, Japan, that have had very high suicide rates because of some of this lack of identity that people have. You know, a lot of suicides happen with younger kids because of that lack of identity. But now we are seeing high rates of suicide among the older sectors of the population due to the economic scourge that bankers are inflicting upon society. So, for example, during the 1997-98 crisis in Japan, I believe the suicide rates went up 35% during that time because of economic difficulties and amongst much higher sectors of age in that population. And in the United States, in the last 10 years or in the last decade, from like 2000 to 2010, among the population aged 35 to 64, suicide rates have been soaring. Like they've increased 30%. So that's obviously due to economic hardship. So as these economic hardships increase, and certainly people are getting fooled by the massive bubbles that central banks are deliberately creating in stock markets and in real estate markets all across the world, but that is going to come crashing down very soon, and people are going to be afflicted with very much more, unfortunately, much more difficult economic times than even now. So people have to understand and identify the reasons why suicide rates are soaring and address these now. So hopefully some of the topics I've been talking about, people can have real conversations with their friends about this, real conversations with their family about this, real conversations if you're a parent with their kids about this, because this needs to be identified in order to stop it. Okay, so there is one point I forgot I actually want to make about education. So if education, truly if the goal of those people that funded the institutional academic system worldwide was to make people smarter, if their goal was to make people smarter, then these classes I think would have to be mandatory. Now that would be classes in divergent thinking, deductive reasoning, logic. And why would I say that? Because I quite frequently get in debates with my friends about, or even strangers, right, that have passionate, closely held beliefs about something, and then logically I can pick it apart. And most logical people, when they're presented with contradicting evidence, will reconsider their position. But what I find is when you can pick apart someone's closely held belief in a very logical sense that a lot of people even become more beholden and enamored and embrace that belief even more strongly than they did before you show them the errors of their thinking in that particular realm, whether it's politics, whether it's economics, whether it's religion. And so many people have closely held beliefs that are absolutely wrong, and that's a shame because that definitely affects your quality of life and it affects your self-identity as well, these beliefs. So you should have the logical capacity to make better informed decisions for yourself on whether this belief is right or wrong or harming you or helping you in life. And so, but a lot of people don't have that because education is not concerned with those topics. Like if I was coming up with a mandatory curriculum, those subjects would be mandatory as well as nutrition. Why nutrition? Because nutrition has a huge impact upon the quality of your life when you get older. If you're fat and obese, the quality of your life might start degrading by the time you're like 25. But if you are healthy, then you can have a great quality of life until you're like 90. So, those are some of the areas where I think education fails miserably. Maybe nutrition doesn't need to be part of education. Maybe that's more a parent's responsibility with kids. But, these are subjects that I would say should be mandatory for everyone. Not that you have to be a nutritional freak, but at least you should have the knowledge to understand that what is nutritious. And you don't have to eat for nutrition all the time. You can eat for pleasure, but at least you have that knowledge. So one of the most important reasons why we all need to focus on our mental strength right now to become as strong as possible mentally before this global economic devastation hits us is because we are going to need to have our minds clicking and sharp to separate the facts from the lies that those in power right now are going to heap upon the world, because they're going to come up with scapegoats, whether it's using racism. They're going to scapegoat immigrants for the problems, economic problems of countries. Already you see with there's a group called the Intergovernmental Group on Climate Change or something like that. I believe it's the United Nations group. And they're already publishing articles saying that global warming is going to be responsible for a worldwide drop in income. Why the hell would global warming be responsible for a worldwide drop in income? They're saying global warming is going to cause hunger, increased poverty, loss of jobs. And it's just a cover, because this is what the fractional reserve banking system is doing to people. This is what central banks are doing to people, and they're going to try to blame it on global warming, which is crazy. And so they're going to try to find other scapegoats out there, and make no mistake about it, the people, these criminal bankers, need to be brought to justice in the end. We can't just say, oh, they did something wrong and let them go. They need to be stuck in jail for a very, very, very long time so they can't repeat these actions. So you need to take the heads of all these big global banks and put them all in jail where they deserve to be. Because you look at, some people say that even the poorest people are the people that hurt most by the banking criminality. Because you look at, what they did when they manipulated gold and silver. So I guess, even in this video, I'll get a little bit of how banker criminality affects poor people. Because in India, which has a soaring suicide rate now, and I believe as of this year, I think their suicide rates are among the highest that they've had in history, with over 370 suicides per day. I believe, one of the reasons probably is because Indians know gold is money and that the rupee is not. So even poor Indians convert rupees into gold. But who can afford to hold on to their gold when gold is cut, when the bankers manipulate it down and suppress it from $1,700 to $1,300 an ounce? Who can afford? The wealthy. They can afford to keep holding it until it goes back up, right? But the poor cannot, because the poor have to convert some of the gold to eat. And when they convert their gold into rupees, because it's they have depressed the value of gold artificially and temporarily, I might add, because it's going to spike much higher than the current price of $1,300 an ounce, that they are starving poor people to death. So it is a terrible thing that they do, and that's why I say you can't let the bankers, you can't let the world leaders that colluded with these bankers either off, because there's a lot of world leaders out there that are crooks parading around in suits too. So they must be held accountable. And there should be some kind of criminal tribunal group that brings these people to justice and puts them away for a very, very long time. So I'm 100% convinced that if people were mentally strong, that we would not be in this global economic crisis that we are in today. Because the only way that this banking, military, industrial, government complex can control us is if we are mentally weak, because that's the way that they exert their influence over us. So parents, as guardians of children, need to first and foremost raise their kids to be mentally strong. But adults, we as adults too, need to take care of our mental health better, because every day I see people walking to work in the morning with glazed looks in their eyes. Seriously, like I can see there's nothing going on in their heads. They're just like robots doing something mechanical, going to work, and I can tell that a lot of people hate their jobs and they're just doing it to survive. So that is not a way to live life. That is surviving. Everyone should find a passion, a goal, their mission in life, and fulfill it. So again, in conclusion, I think that the majority of global suicides today are a reflection of the ill mental health of society. So we need to start working on changing the ways, the manner in which people communicate with each other in all relationships. We need to bring back the humanity in people and kind of temper some of this technology that was ruining the humanity of people. And I believe we need to do it now because, again, I believe that there's going to be great economic devastation within the next few years. And it could be as soon as 2014. So if we don't solve these problems before 2014, we're going to have a real global epidemic of suicides on our hands, and that's going to be a huge problem. So, you know, one more thing I'll leave you with. 20-year-old Korean supermodel doll Kim, before she killed herself on her blog, she wrote something to the effect of, "Life is quite easy for me, but I feel empty. But it's not a problem because I feel empty every day," or something to that effect. She wrote something very similar to that. And I think that's the problem we need to look at. Why are people feeling so empty? And that's a problem of society. And so hopefully we can fix that. So please leave your comments below. I really appreciate you watching if you made it to the end. And certainly do leave your comments below because this is a super important topic. So hopefully we can spur mature discussion about it below. And until next time, thanks for watching. Take care.